Welcome to BeingLab. This is another episode where I try to expose simple concepts, day-to-day concepts that sometimes we don't have a space to talk about or reflect or ponder on. Today's topic is titled Hacking Suffering. Yes, you heard it right. We're gonna talk about suffering. Please don't go anywhere. We begin. I am Gonzalo Cordova, and this is BeingLab, conversations that transform the way you see the world. Hacking suffering. That's today's topic in this podcast called BeingLab. And today I want to walk you through the idea of suffering and how sometimes suffering, it's absolutely a path and no longer a sentence. You're going to walk with me throughout a path that offers a new perspective on how suffering can be seen from a different lens. But one of the things that I like to show you today is that I'm working on next year's projects. A lot of new things for you and my clients and anyone who's interested. I'm going to be launching something special. And so please stay, because throughout this episode, I'm going to give you a few hints that I will reveal until the end of the year. So hopefully you'll stay and you'll be part of it. So let's begin. What is suffering? Think about, what did you learn growing up about what suffering is? If you think about, I'm sure when you were a kid, something prompted you to realize, oh, this is suffering. So I want you to think about that right now. Capture the idea of suffering. And if you noticed, in that distinction, we typically confuse suffering with pain. But let me begin there. Pain is physical. Pain is something physical. Suffering is a perception or a linguistic phenomenon. So now you know the difference between pain and suffering. So when you say, oh, this is so painful, well, we're using that term wrongly, because what in truth we should be saying is, I don't agree with you. I don't like the way you're treating me, or waiting in line for 3 hours is not what I expected, but here we are. Instead of, oh, this is so painful. Well, maybe you're in pain if your feet hurt while waiting for 3 hours. That's the correct distinction, but is not the correct term, right? So we have to distinguish between those two, because we tend to confuse them or collapse them. So from now on, you know that if it's something physical, we're going to talk about pain. But when it's a perception, or when it's my interaction or the way I'm perceiving something, it could be, linguistically speaking, suffering. Suffering is also, in my humble opinion, something that we learn culturally. That in life, we are going to encounter situations that we do not like, that represent a big challenge for us, that mean that it feels like we're swimming against the flow, that things do not flow. And we tend to label those suffering. We even complain with others about others causing suffering to us. But the truth of the matter is, suffering, it is only a lens that we see through. And the way I like to shred or begin to understand suffering, the best way that I found so far, at least for me, is through the Buddhist approach. And there's this little story that says that when in life we are walking through this, say, this forest, and they throw an arrow at us, we cannot control the first arrow. That first arrow is always going to be something that you weren't expecting. You don't want that arrow to hit you. But the second one, the second arrow is our emotion. It's our reaction to the first. Think this through with me. The way in which we react to the arrow is our perspective on the situation and not necessarily the situation. The way, or another way in which I like to explain this, is when we take a look at the emotional world, the emotional domain. I don't know if you've noticed that you can be watching a movie with someone, right? On the couch, eating popcorn or your favorite beverage, and you may be laughing and the person next to you is scared. Why is that? Why is that even a possibility? Well, because the way in which we are interpreting the screen, the phenomenon, the script, the acting is different. We perceive differently. And given that we perceive differently, we emote in a different way. And that alone tells us that something that can be very shocking for you, it could be nothing for them. Or something that means suffering to you, it may not mean suffering to them. When we hear about someone's relative passing, that is a cause for, we feel sad about them, but we do not feel what they're going through. We can be compassionate, sometimes empathetic, if we went through that. But if not, we say, I'm so sorry for your loss, but we do not feel the loss because it is not our relative. And so the suffering or the pain is not ours to feel. So that is also another perspective, that when we learn to dive into our emotional world, into our emotional domain, we then identify with words what we are experiencing instead of labeling this a situation that is causing you to suffer. Also, from the Buddhist perspective, there's this interesting saying that I think it's often misinterpreted, which is that suffering is a constant. And I think when we hear that, we almost feel, in a way, like there's nothing we can do about it. We resignate to the fact that, okay, suffering is always going to be around, so why bother? But I think, and if you read and if you immerse yourself in Buddhist concepts, what they mean is that suffering is a choice from where we can actually either learn or ignore. We can actually acknowledge and be with it and see it as close as we can, or we can pretend that it's not there, although it stinks up the room. Or it is causing us trouble even to think about the person or the situation. So take a look how something that is so human, something that is so known, particularly in soap operas, it is actually a job that we choose to take upon our shoulders if we want. So today I want to give you a tool that will help you reduce, if not eliminate, suffering forever. The tool is this one simple concept: learning to label and recognize your emotions. And let me open a quick parenthesis. In the beginning of this episode, I told you that I'm working on a future project that I'm going to launch with my team. And it's actually a work about emotions. We're going to dive deep into emotions, and I'd love for you to be part of it. So please be patient with me. We're working really hard to make this happen, and we love for you to be part of it. So let me know if you're interested. By the way, I'm going to do this in a very private and a very interesting way. It's going to be extremely experiential, but we're still working on it. And it relates dramatically and in a positive way with the work of learning to not suffering, learning to be at ease with what we have around. Okay, so let me continue with the podcast then, with the episode. We're talking about suffering and how can we hack suffering. And what I've been saying so far is that the conception or the idea of suffering is only a choice that we choose to take. And that when you learn to label your emotions almost like a catalog of the human emotion, then those tools help you choose whether you're going to be in dramatically experiencing that situation, or maybe you will choose something else that'll help you pass forward that situation. And so I want to give you the basic of that so you can truly become an expert over time in that domain. The first thing we need to learn is that for whatever reason, we've been taught that emotions are wrong to have. And some of them are positive and some of them are negative. And that we have the pretty ones, the ones we like, and we have the ugly ones, the ones you should avoid. And I like to break that idea, shred that idea, put it in the garbage can, and invite you to ponder on the following concept. From now on, emotions aren't good or bad, aren't positive or negative. From now on, they are neutral. Like a battery, a neutral battery. You're going to choose if it's positive or negative, depending on you, on how you relate to the situation. Let me rephrase that real quick. The way in which you are going to experience emotions are not going to be depending on the situation, but on your assessment of the situation. That makes them neutral. So by itself, anger is not good or bad. It could be very positive if you're trying to run away from someone chasing you with an axe. Or it could be terrible if you're having a conversation with your board, right? With your stakeholders. Because you're going to hit them and you're going to lose everything, right? That's not an appropriate or acceptable behavior from people. And so knowing that your perception changes the way you relate to emotions empowers you automatically. Now, for those of you thinking, well, but I choose not to be emotional, that's the emotion of denial, okay? That's the emotion of neglecting the existence of emotions. We can do that too. And we are really good at pretending that we don't feel, that we don't sense, that we don't experience things within us. But the truth is, at the end of the day, the person that tells you, I don't feel it, I don't emote, in the end, when they put their head on their pillow, they can sense that it was a harsh day and they're sad or desperate or frustrated or angry. So we all experience emotions. Whether we have access to them or not, that's a different story. So once again, what is this knowledge that I'm talking about? I'm talking about learning. It's a emotional literacy. Just like when you learned your ABCs, your A, the sound of the A and the B and the C and so forth and on. It took you time, right? It took us time. 7 to 8 years took all of us to learn the ABCs, the vowels, all the sounds, the different sounds that letters do and make, and how we combine those and form letters and sentences and paragraphs and books. Well, that takes time. And the same thing is going to happen with the emotional domain if you choose to work with me in this. So the first thing we need to recognize is that we live in a very polarized world where we see emotions as good or bad, positive or negative. So from now on, they're no longer that. They're neutral. You make them negative or positive or good or bad, depending on you. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing I want you to learn is that you don't know about emotions. You mix them. You confuse them. You are like a baby that if I were to give you a crayon, you will write on the walls or draw on the carpet with a Sharpie because you don't know. You know it's a marker, but you don't know its function. And I want to tell you at least one function of an emotion that is going to surprise you dramatically. Anger. Do you know why we feel angry? We feel anger. Do you know why we get mad at things? The reason why we get angry is because we assess that whatever is occurring in front of you, whatever is happening in front of us, is not fair. When we say to ourselves, this isn't just, this isn't fair, anger triggers in us. And anger is our emotion that you can easily and very fast, you can distinguish an angry person just by looking at them. Other emotions are more subtle, more, I would say, under the skin. But anger is something that we all recognize and see it in the vein, right? In their neck, on their neck, or their fists, or the frowning of here, right? The face, the expression, the eyes are like daggers. So it's impossible to deny that we are angry. However, when they ask us, are you angry? We say no, everything's fine. And if you're watching this episode with video, you know what I'm talking about. If not, if you're only having the audio portion of this episode, imagine how your face frowns like a prune or like a raisin when you get angry. We get all wrinkled and we make two fists and all we want is to get even. That's what we want when we're angry. But why do we experience that emotion in any way? Because otherwise, and this is the answer, we wouldn't be able to distinguish what's fair and what's not fair to us. That's why we experience that emotion. If you do not experience anger, they can pass over you. They can walk over you and you're not going to say anything because you can't relate to it. Everything and anything is going to be fair. But thankfully, we have that emotion that allows us to say it is not available. It is not admissible that you are late, right? That's what we say to our employees or to someone that we're waiting for. It's not fair that I waited for you for 3 hours and you didn't even give me a call to let me know that you were stuck in traffic. Those things makes us wonder, well, what's the next conversation that I need to have now, from now on, with this person so this won't happen again. So just like that, my friends, we have over 200 emotions that are like pipes, like the pipes in your house, that every time something happens, certain temperature water comes out, depending on your assessment of the situation. Well, from now on, you know that if you say this is not fair, this is not just, this is unfair, you get angry. So that's the piping inside of your body moving and saying, oh, I am, over the limit with this. This cannot be happening. So this is a great tool when you want to learn to dance with suffering, because suffering is showing you something particular, that you're experiencing is not what you wanted, that you like a different future, and you love for that future to be not that, to be more peaceful, to be more calming, to be more friendly, or just simply avoid the situation. So But you get to choose, and that's the beauty of the emotional domain. You get to choose the level of tension. Sometimes people misunderstand when I say you get to choose the emotion. They think that if they're angry, they can switch to happiness. I am not saying that. What I'm saying is, if you're extremely angry, you get to choose whether you continue being angry or you breathe and reduce the tension so you can have a conversation and disclose your sense of injustice. Do you see that? That's the power of emotions and how they relate to language. So I have homework for you. The homework is become a radar, right? Monitor your emotions. Learn to label them. Put them in a catalog and distinguish when do I feel trapped, suffering because something happened, and when do you feel at ease because now you found the way through the emotional aspect. Let me know how that goes for you. Please reach out and remember that the easiest way in which you can help me grow this channel is if you follow, you like, and leave your comments. Particularly if you're on Spotify, now you can leave comments and let me know what was your favorite part, or if you have any questions or like to have a conversation with me, happy to do so. Once again, Gonzalo Cordova here, and it was a pleasure talking to you about hacking suffering. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening, BeingLab. You can follow me on social media at Gonzalo Cordova. Please like and follow, and thank you for being here.